Welcome to the Strange North channel. In this video, I'm going to show you the top 10 haunted locations in Alberta that are not in Edmonton and Calgary. I already did a couple videos highlighting the haunted locations in Edmonton and Calgary specifically, but these places are outside of those major population centers, everywhere from the mountains to the Badlands to some of Alberta's smaller towns and cities. So to start our list, at number 1 is the Banff Springs Hotel. This is a beautiful building. It was opened in 1888 by the Canadian Pacific Railway, and it's one of the oldest grand railway hotels in Canada. This sits in the middle of the Canadian Rockies, and it's an absolutely stunning building inside and out. At one time, this was the tallest building in Canada. Of course, now it doesn't even come close, but it's a fantastic building to check out. The main ghost of this building is that of the ghost bride, who apparently fell to her death on the grand staircase of the hotel in 1930. She has been seen around the hotel, especially around the staircase and the main ballroom. The ghostly bride of Banff Springs Hotel is actually featured on a collector's stamp and coin that were produced by the Royal Canadian Mint. A number of years ago, the Canadian Mint did a bunch of stamps and coins that commemorated various significant paranormal events and apparitions in Canadian history. Another ghost of the hotel is said to be Sam Macaulay, who was a friendly old Scotsman who was a bellhop in the hotel in the 60s and 70s. Apparently, room 873 of the hotel has been permanently sealed because guests over the years reported so much strange activity happening in this room, including bloody handprints appearing on a wall and being woken up abruptly at night by some unseen force inside the room. And the Rob Roy room, as well as the Mackenzie room of the hotel, are also hotspots for paranormal activity. So this hotel definitely deserves a mention on a list of Alberta's most haunted locations. At number 2 is the site of Frank's Slide. Frank's Slide was one of the most significant disasters in Alberta history. On April 29th of 1909, there was a small town called Frank that sat at the base of Turtle Mountain. All of a sudden, in the middle of the night, over 110 million tons of limestone slid down Turtle Mountain and absolutely devastated and buried the town of Frank. It was estimated that between 70 and 90 people were killed in the slide, and most of these people remain buried in the rubble. This area is now a provincial historic site, and it gets a ton of visitors every year. Over the years, this area has gotten a reputation as being quite haunted. People have talked about feeling very eerie in the area, and also hearing disembodied voices and seeing strange, unexplained lights in this area at night. This area now features a permanent interpretive center that sits on a hill overlooking the site, where staff members will explain the history of this area, and it has these really cool walkways where you can go out and get fantastic views of this whole area. Definitely a cool area worth visiting if you're in southern Alberta. And number 3 is the Hillcrest mine disaster area. The Hillcrest mine disaster is the worst mining disaster in Canadian history. On June 19th of 1914, an explosion ripped through the Hillcrest mine and 189 workers died. A grave site and monument now sit right beside the original site of the mine. This monument now sits as a tribute to the workers that lost their lives, and it sits right beside the site of the original mine, which is now on private property. But over the years, this entire area has gained a reputation as being one of the most haunted locations in Alberta. At number 4 is the Empress Theatre in Fort McLeod. This was opened in 1912, and it is considered one of the most haunted old theaters in North America. It originally started out as part of the famous Players franchise, and rumors of this theater being haunted started as early as the 1960s. It is reportedly haunted by Ed, who was a janitor there in the 1930s, and he often appears as a burly man in a cowboy hat walking throughout the theater and taking in shows. And one of the hallmarks of the haunted activity in this theater is the constant unexplained triggering of alarms that go off when no one is in the building. So now we're going to move over to Lethbridge. At number 5 is the Galt Museum and Archives. This building was opened in 1910, and it was originally a hospital. In 1933, there was a man named George Bailey who was a patient in the hospital, and as the story goes, he was on a gurney being pushed onto the elevator when all of a sudden the elevator started to rise on its own without anyone touching any of the controls. The gurney got sort of stuck halfway up the elevator, and George Bailey ended up being dropped off the gurney down the elevator shaft where he he died. And to this day, his ghost is said to haunt this building. People often hear the sounds of phantom shuffling feet coming from unoccupied areas of this building, and people have also talked about experiencing random blasts of cold air in their face. And to this day, this is considered one of the most haunted buildings in Alberta. At number 6, also in Lethbridge, is the Bowman Art Centre. This building was opened in 1912, and it was actually the first school in Alberta for vocational training. According to the legend, there was once a young Chinese girl who was severely beaten after being mistaken for a boy in the women's restroom. And apparently to this day, people often hear the phantom crying of this girl coming from the women's restroom. And this is considered one of the most haunted locations in Alberta. At number 7 is the Atlas Coal Mine. This is a really cool area of the Badlands to check out. This is Canada's most complete historic coal mine, and it's now a national and provincial historic site. This mine was active from 1936 to 1984, and at least 13 people died here during the mine's operation. The mine was originally owned by the Patrick family, and there is a legend of one of the Patrick sons named Billy who wandered off into the mine one day and never returned. And apparently to this day, his ghost has been seen laughing and playing on the grounds of this mine, and it's considered one of the most haunted locations in Alberta. At number 8 is the Rosedeer Hotel and Last Chance Saloon in the small town of Wayne, Alberta. This is very close to Drumheller, and it's such a cool looking building. Over the years, this building has gained a very nefarious reputation. In the 1920s, apparently there were so many fights that happened in the saloon, it was nicknamed the Bucket of Blood. And there is a legend about a man being murdered by the KKK on the 3rd floor of the hotel. And to this day, the 3rd floor of the hotel remains a hot spot for paranormal activity. Throughout the years, staff members have often talked about hearing their name being called when they're alone in certain areas of the building, and visitors and guests in the building have reported all manner of strange experiences happening to them. So this is definitely worth a mention on a list of haunted places in Alberta. At number 9 is the St. Anne Ranch House in Trochu. This is now a provincial historic site, and it's such a beautiful building to check out. So the town of Trochu was started by a group of aristocratic French cavalrymen that were drawn to the area because it had a sheltered coulee that apparently had these bubbling springs that never ran dry in the summer and didn't freeze over in the winter. Over the years, guests at this ranch house have talked about being woken up in the middle of the night by the ghost of a young woman that suddenly appears at the end of their bed and stares at them. You can actually stay in this building now. It's rented out to individuals and groups that want to rent out the whole building. I got a chance to film a little bit inside this building, and it's so beautiful. It has so much character. So this would be a really cool place to visit, especially if you're willing to risk the overnight experience. And at number 10, to close out our list, in the city of Red Deer is the Cronquist House. This is one of the oldest, most historic buildings in Red Deer. It was built in 1911 by Emmanuel Cronquist, and this building was actually moved from the Cronquist farm to its current location in 1976 by a group of community activists that were looking to preserve the building. Over the years, people have talked about table settings and cups and saucers being moved around, doors slamming shut, and the sounds of phantom footsteps happening upstairs when they're alone in the house. And to this day, this is considered one of the most haunted locations in Alberta. So those were the top 10 haunted locations in Alberta outside of Edmonton and Calgary. If you want to see haunted places in Edmonton or Calgary, check out my other videos because I've covered those cities specifically. You know, I'm on the fence when it comes to haunted locations. Some things seem really credible and some not so much. But one thing I like about looking at haunted locations is it just helps me learn a bit more about an area's history by looking at some of its oldest buildings. And there's definitely some other haunted locations in Alberta that I didn't include in this video that I'd like to get to in another video down the road. If you watched this far, thank you very much. And if you're interested in watching more of my videos, please subscribe to my channel because I'm going to be uploading at least one new video per week. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Strange North channel.